Hello and welcome to ET Now Debates. I am Ankur Mishra. We put spotlight on India-US trade tensions as Donald Trump has once again taken a swipe at India's tariffs. The US president has accused India of imposing massive duties on American goods and claims that India has now agreed to lower tariffs, but only after being finally exposed. So is Trump's statement mere a rhetoric or a strategic push to extract last-minute trade concessions from India? While the government is still finalizing the structure and list of tariff revisions, are we conceding too much under pressure? And should India stick to its negotiation strategy instead of bowing to external demands? Let's listen into an excerpt of what actually Donald Trump said.
India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. It's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. You know, we do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done.
To decode this trade battle and what it means for India, we are joined by Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador and India's representative to WTO, Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, and Ajay Dua, former Commerce and Industry Secretary. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's go straight into it. Has India actually agreed to lower tariffs, or it's just US flexing its negotiation muscle? First, I want to come to you, Mr. Sajjanhar. Why do you think Trump has announced something like this before any statement which came from Indian government?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. You know, Trump has been talking against India even when he was the candidate, even before he had won the election. And of course, this rhetoric has become much sharper after he won the election. And he's been making these statements that India's tariffs are very high. You know, we have acknowledged, we have accepted that we are going to negotiate. We have not stated anywhere that we are going to lower our tariffs per se. So, you know, it was decided on the 13th of February when Prime Minister Modi was in Washington, D.C., and the joint statement very clearly mentions that we are going to engage in negotiations for a the first tranche of the multi-sectoral bilateral trade agreement, which will be signed, which will be ready by this fall, that is September, October. And to show our good faith, our Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal was in Washington, D.C. from the 4th to the 6th. He met his counterparts, USTR, Secretary of Commerce, etc., and discussions are going on. So, you know, he exaggerates, basically possibly to impose, you know, greater pressure, to apply greater pressure. You know, when he says that, you know, India has been exposed.
Valid point. I would want to come to you, Mr. Dua, as well. Now, this is a kind of tactics which is being involved by Trump for all other countries as well. What should be our strategy, particularly to WTO per se, which India should adopt now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mishra. I think the first reaction, the response of India to anything coming out of the United States, including from the head of the government, the head of state, is not to panic. One, whether it's a tactical move, whether it's a policy statement which will be adhered to, only he knows, or a few people close to him. We should be going by the structure which has been put in position when the two heads of government met in mid-February in the US. That is, we will negotiate and sit together with the authorities, or the authorities of the two countries which sit together to negotiate and enter into a possible FTA by October this year. Having said that, I would attach fair amount of importance to what Mr. Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary, said yesterday after the 2 days of discussions with Mr. Piyush Goyal. He did say a few things which are along the lines of what President Trump has said. But I think he put it down the way negotiations should be done. That is, that the US considers that the tariff levels between India and the US, the differential is very large. Now, let's just talk about each of these points which was made. Yes, it was large. We have reduced something, but let us be very clear. We have to be looking not just at the mere rates, saying in one item we have 17%, the United States has 3%. We have to look at the weighted average of each item in the trade basket of 190 billion. That 190 billion includes the services exports, which your figure, which you just put on the ticker, was probably only referring to merchandise of 150 billion. The fact is, if the differential is now about 4.8, 4.9%, yes, it needs to be addressed. And I think a way out is being provided by the Indian industry itself. First, it was the Indian pharmaceutical industry, which exports fair amount of generics to the generic medicines to the United States.
Fair point.
Yes,
there is a trade deficit, but I'm still to digest the point that why will US president make an announcement like this without any official statement coming in from India? I want to come to you, Mr. Das Gupta. What do you think is the strategy?
I think President Trump has been given to indulging in hyperbole, and he makes these statements, I think, more for the effect to his constituents, even now, than for anything else. To say that India has been exposed, I think, is very undiplomatic and should have been avoided. Because WTO obligations have been there since 1995. And before that, the GATT obligations in every country has to file a schedule. Those were available in the public domain from 1948 onwards. So how has India been exposed? All these things are in the public domain. So let us not get swayed by the rhetoric of President Trump. He's been in the habit of making these very extreme statements. The point is, as my previous speakers have mentioned, it has to be negotiated. And all developing countries, mind you, he's also singled out, for instance, Mexico, and he's earlier mentioned Brazil. Now, Brazil has even higher tariffs than India. And Mexico, despite this USMCA, which President Trump himself negotiated and okayed in his first stint, Mexico has fairly low tariffs as compared to India, I would say. But even then, he's making a target of Mexico. So, it is very difficult to predict as to what exactly he's aiming for. And if we get into the sector-wise discussion, we will find that most of the goods that the Americans are at the moment exporting to India are coming in, 75% of them are coming in at less than 5% duty. Now, there is no point in making an average kind of a simple arithmetical average, which nobody really does in trade parlance, and then saying that India has, such high tariffs.
Yes, so the point being, it looks more like rhetoric because the negotiations were already on. Our Commerce and Industries Minister was there in United States. There were discussions which was ongoing. Now, what will work actually? I want to come to you, Mr. Sajjanhar. Will old school diplomacy work here by Indian side?
No, I think we have to be, let's look at it objectively. We had started negotiating a mini trade deal with with the United States, even during Trump 1.0. You would recall that we were quite close to finalizing it when COVID struck and we were not able to take it forward. But I think we have identified a number of areas where the United States wants more access, better access. You have been showing some of these items whether it is automotive components, whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is, as some of the agricultural products. So we have to see where we can give way, where it is, it'll not be hurting our own domestic industry. And simultaneously, we have to see what is it that we can get from the United States, because I think we have to recognize, let me make two very quick points. Number one, United States is our biggest trading partner in goods and services. $190 billion. We are to go up to $500 billion another 5 years. I think it is very good to have an FTA with our biggest trading partner. Number two, I think our tariffs are somewhat high. And if we really want to be a part of global value chains and global supply chains, Ankit, we have to reduce our tariffs. And I think if there is a little bit of pressure from outside that is being applied, I think it is good and we should move in that direction. So I think it's going to be good for our own industry. It will make our industry more competitive. And the last point I want to make here is that if he's applying these pressures, also on other countries, like particularly China, there would be some possibility, some space that will be made available like it was done in Trump 1.0, which will allow us to enhance our own exports to America. So I think it is a mixed bag, but of course, we will need to see where we can make some concessions and what are the ask that we have of the United States to get greater access into the US market. Ankit.
Right. Mr. Dua, you would have been involved in the past in such kind of negotiations. You have seen in the past. What is your assessment from India's point of view that negotiations should happen on the table? Or now that Commerce Minister is already back in India, we have been told, what do you think is the possibility now? Has the decision already been done according to you? Or you think that negotiation need to continue because these are big items?
I think the negotiations have just begun. It is going to take a long time for the negotiations to fructify into something concrete. The statement by the US Commerce Secretary saying that if we should not be talking about product by product tariffs, instead we should be talking about a mega trade deal and a trade deal in which the tariffs from both sides are very low, near zero, is what the suggestion has been made. He's clarified that the reciprocal tariffs, what has been talked about by the president, is not the way forward because it reduces market access to both the countries, and that for India and the US, that's not the way forward. So I think I would go by much more of what President's envoy, the Commerce Secretary, has talked about than the off-the-cuff remarks of the President. And two things he has said. One, that let us not talk about reciprocal tariffs, but let's talk about bringing the tariffs on each other's items to fairly low stages. I just want to make one other point, Ankit. It has got this very statement from the President of the United States and followed by the Commerce Secretary's statement has got China alerted. Yesterday, the Foreign Minister of China, Wang Yi, has already made statement because in the case of China, 10% duty was levied on 1st of February and another 10% on the 2nd of March. They have retaliated 15% by 15% duties. So the space is going to be narrowing for trade, and countries like India, which lower their tariff, a point which was made by Mr. Ashok Sajanar a little while ago, it would going to be very helpful in increasing our trade with the United States, lower them. And the point I'm just trying to make is Chinese are saying, let the elephant and the dragon now tango together, saying let's get together and face the situation This is the same foreign minister or as the foreign advisor, who was taking a different stand 3 months ago.
Right, point taken here. But let me remind to our viewers that ET Now had earlier done a story saying that all these negotiations will work from the month of April. In fact, as Mr. Dua was mentioning, this is just a start of negotiation, which looks like Mr. Das Gupta, from a practical point of view, I want to understand now on how will things move forward for investors, from traders point of view, who want to understand that, just President Trump announcing that India has lowered tariffs, does it work like that?
Well, it doesn't. Very simply put, it doesn't. Because people will have to read the fine print. And, it is all very well to say at the 8-digit level, for instance, in the universe of goods, there are more than 12,000 lines. And each of those lines represent approximately 25 products, different products coming under the same line. So the US couldn't be interested in this huge universe because it just doesn't have the industry, the kind of manufacturing base. Even China doesn't have that. So we have to first narrow down what are the interests that the US has. The US has to spell it out. For instance, President Trump has been harping on this issue of Harley Davidson motorcycles. Harley Davidson was here, went back, and now they are planning to bring in motorcycles from Thailand. Apart from, of course, the corporate profit business, and the royalty which they will get from their subsidiary in Thailand, it's not going to, improve the employment situation in the US, which the President Trump has been, constantly repeating that we will bring jobs back to the US. So first, the negotiators have to be very clear as to what is their objective, which are the areas in which they would like to increase their exports. One. Two, in trade, everything has got a price. You can't just have a one-way, movement. Something has to be given to the other side as well. And in this context, I am reminded of Angela Merkel, who was mentioned in her biography about President Trump's first stint. She felt that he believes that it is a zero-sum game. That if I lose, you win. I must win, then you will lose. Trade is not like that. In trade, everybody must win to a greater or lesser extent. Maybe not to an equal extent.
Right, so right. Since there is a paucity of time, gentlemen, I'm apologizing for stopping you in middle, but we have a limited point of view. What I wanted to understand from all of you is, if at all India decides to lower the tariffs, if at all what President Trump is saying is actually some kind of reality. I'm not saying for all the items, but some kind of reality in some sectors. Which are those sectors where India can negotiate? Okay, these are the sectors we agree, but there are the sectors which needs to be protected. What should be those? I want to come to you. Each one of you can have their own picks. Mr. Dua, I will want to start with you.
I think reflecting what support which the Indian negotiators have received from the Indian industry, the Indian industry is okay for zero tariff against both countries, levying zero tariff on pharmaceuticals, the generic pharmaceuticals, and our imports of pharmaceuticals from them. They are okay with textiles as well as apparel, because they think that zero trade, the benefits will come to India, not to Bangladesh, Vietnam, Mexico, and China, who are big exporters. And also, I think it is time, let's not call agriculture to be sacrosanct, that we are not going to open up certain sectors, certain segments of the agriculture sector, because the world over, India's stand has not really, in the last 25, 30 years, whenever the WTO negotiations have been held, we have tried to defend our agriculture. That has been seen as, because we say 50% of our population is engaged there, etc. It's to, I think certain aspects of it we could open up while protecting certain others and not keep on calling it, saying that's not open for negotiations. And finally, I'm also inclined to say
Right,
that
I got your
India
point. Quickly,
Yeah.
I want to get other reactions as well. Mr. Sajjanhar, what do you think? Quickly, just these are the sectors where we can at least negotiate, and which are the sectors we need to protect? Quickly.
Yeah, two quick points. Number one is I think we need to move beyond tariffs because, you know, our tariffs are high, US tariffs are low. If we are just negotiating on tariffs, I think we are on an unequal playing field. We need a level playing field. We need to see areas where we can get more access. And of course, there is greater access that is available. There are many areas in which we have interest where US has peak tariffs, you know, like agriculture, handmade products, leather, etc. So those are areas we need to identify where we have to expand our own entry into the market. As far as our own areas are concerned, you know, look at it, for instance, you know, Californian almonds come from there. There's no problem. They are not creating any damage to our industry. Similarly, on pistachio, I am told we have more than 100% duty. I think Indian consumer is a very discerning consumer. Also, as far as automotive components are concerned.
Fair point.
Also, as
Fair
far
point.
as petrochemicals are concerned.
These are the sectors which has been also listed and discussed by Indian side as well as US side. A final word I would want to come to Mr. Das Gupta as well. Now that Indian response is still awaited, I want to understand that how should Indian side now handle the situation, considering Trump has already given the statement. What do you think could be the Indian response now?
Well, there are a few points which I would like to mention very quickly. The first one is that an FTA between a developed country and a developing country has to conform to Article 24 of the WTO. And that says that substantially all trade must be covered. You can't just pick and choose a few areas. That, if we do that, that would be a violation. Two, if an FTA is not signed, but it is a question of giving mutual concessions outside of an FTA, it is going to be totally violative of the WTO, and it is going to be a big dent to the international trading order, which has been built up since 1948, and all the agreements, negotiations which have taken place amongst a host of countries. Now there are 166 members, including the US. So these have to be borne in mind while entering into an agreement. The third point is President Trump has been constantly saying about reducing tariffs on the behalf of India. He's not mentioned anything that he will give to India. So he will stand where he is, or the US is, and expect concessions from India.
Fair
and
point.
the other partners.
Fair point. This is what is something which needs to be watched out from Indian side. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining at this hour and discussing this topic in detail. Now the verdict is clear. Even though President Trump has made statement on India that India has agreed to lower the tariffs, but the negotiations, diplomacy is not a T20 match. It's a test match, it takes time, and we expect the negotiation to continue. With this, it's the time to take the thanks all the viewers for watching this important debate, and it's time to say goodbye.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.